Have you ever noticed how the loudest voices often silence the wisest? It happens everywhere, on television panels, in classrooms, at dinner tables, and especially online. The people who speak with the greatest certainty are rarely those who have thought the longest. They are those who have simply learned how to shout the loudest. Wisdom, in contrast, often speaks softly. It hesitates, questions, and doubts itself. And in our modern age of noise, hesitation is mistaken for weakness, while arrogance is confused for truth. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as self-evident. But in a world where ridicule spreads faster than fire, truth often burns out before it reaches the second stage. It is mocked, drowned in memes, dismissed as elitism, or silenced under the weight of collective laughter. This is the silent surrender of wisdom. It doesn't die in combat. It dies from neglect. Imagine, for a moment, a small village square in the time of the ancients. A philosopher stands upon a stone, offering his reflection. The good life is not in wealth, but in virtue. He speaks gently, carefully, choosing each word like a craftsman. But before the words can land, a jester leaps in, mocking the philosopher with exaggerated gestures, twisting his message into comedy. The crowd laughs. They laugh not because they understand the philosopher, but because laughter is easier than thought. Fast forward 2,000 years, and the square is no longer stone. It is digital. Social media has become the new arena where philosophers and jesters meet. Only now the algorithm rewards the jester. Outrage spreads faster than reflection, humor faster than honesty, and certainty faster than complexity. We have inherited the same village square, but now it has billions of spectators, all with a finger on the share button. And so, collective stupidity begins to win, not because it is right, but because it is loud. Carl Jung understood this paradox deeply. He believed that most people do not really think, they imitate. To think independently requires courage, to stand alone in the wilderness of uncertainty, but to imitate requires only submission, and the psyche finds comfort in submission, for belonging feels safer than truth. This is why the herd so easily overpowers the thinker. The herd offers validation. You are one of us. You belong. The thinker offers alienation. You may be right, but you will stand alone. And so, most people choose silence over truth. They surrender without even realizing it. In classrooms, students hold back their genuine questions because they fear sounding stupid. At work, employees bite their tongues rather than point out flaws in leadership. In politics, voters repeat slogans they don't fully understand because questioning them would mean exile from their group. The silent surrender is not forced. It is chosen. Day after day, in small, invisible moments. I once heard the story of a young student who sat in the back of his philosophy lecture, notebook open but pen unmoving. The professor had just asked a simple but profound question. What does it mean to live a good life? The room went quiet. The boy had a thought, a fragile, delicate thought, that living a good life meant to live authentically, even if it brought suffering. He wanted to raise his hand. But as he glanced around, he saw the smirks of his classmates, the impatience in their posture, the hunger for the professor to just get on with it. And so the boy lowered his hand. His idea, like countless others, died unborn. This is how wisdom loses, one silenced thought at a time. It is not crushed under tyranny but dissolved in apathy. Nietzsche would have called this the triumph of the herd instinct. He warned that human beings, deep down, crave simplicity over complexity. Stupidity is easy. Wisdom is hard. Stupidity reassures us. Don't think too much. Just follow the crowd. Wisdom unsettles us. You must question even the ground beneath your feet. Collective stupidity thrives because it feels good. It offers clarity where there is none, certainty where there is doubt, and belonging where there is loneliness. It spreads because it meets our psychological need for comfort. Wisdom, by contrast, is heavy. It demands that you bear responsibility for your own mind, your own choices, your own life. It demands that you resist the crowd even when the crowd mocks you. Most people simply do not want this burden. Here lies the heart of the problem, the trade-off between belonging and truth. To belong, you must sacrifice part of your mind. To be wise, you must risk standing alone. The tragedy of our age is that we have built systems, schools, workplaces, media platforms that reward belonging more than truth. Success is measured by followers, likes, and votes, not by depth, integrity, or wisdom. The philosopher is exiled, while the jester is crowned king. Tolstoy, in his despair, once admitted that society's games of wealth and status nearly drove him to suicide. Only by stepping outside the herd did he rediscover meaning. Yet today, stepping outside feels harder than ever. The herd has grown global, and its noise is constant. So why is collective stupidity winning over wisdom? Because wisdom has no army. It whispers, it waits, it questions. Stupidity has an army, the crowd, the mob, the algorithm. And in the battle of whispers versus shouts, shouts win the ears of the many. But this victory is shallow. A society that silences its wisest voices is like a ship that throws its compass into the sea because it slows down the rowing. For a while the ship moves faster, but eventually it loses direction. As you read this, perhaps you feel a quiet recognition. Perhaps you too have silenced a thought, swallowed a question, or chosen laughter over listening. That is the silent surrender. It may seem small, but multiplied across millions of people, it becomes the tide that drowns wisdom. The first step, then, is awareness. To notice the moments when we silence ourselves, not because we are wrong, but because we fear the herd. To notice when we choose the comfort of conformity over the courage of truth. Because the greatest tragedy is not that stupidity wins. The greatest tragedy is that wisdom never even tries to fight. Wisdom does not need to shout, but it does need to speak. Every time you silence your thought for fear of ridicule, you contribute to the victory of stupidity. And every time you speak with honesty, even trembling, you keep wisdom alive. Why do we fear being wrong less than we fear being alone? This single question, perhaps more than any other, explains why collective stupidity so often defeats wisdom. Most people would rather be wrong with the herd than right in isolation. Carl Jung once observed that the greatest danger to the individual is not external enemies but the crowd within. It is the inner voice that whispers, "Do not stand out. Do not be different. Do not risk exile." Nietzsche, in his sharp way, called this the instinct of the herd, the deep primal need to dissolve oneself into the safety of the many. The herd gives us a sense of belonging, but it comes at a cost, the death of independent thought. Picture a crowded stadium. Thousands of fans stand, shouting the same chant, waving the same flags, roaring with one voice. Now imagine one man in the middle of that ocean of noise who suddenly decides to stop chanting. He lowers his flag. He goes silent. At once he feels the weight of 1,000 eyes, the invisible pressure of being different. What has he done? Nothing more than think for himself, but to the herd, his silence is an act of betrayal. He is not punished for being wrong. He is punished for daring to separate. This is why wisdom feels dangerous. To think for yourself is to risk loneliness. To question the chant is to risk exile. And for most, exile feels unbearable. Jung believed that one of the deepest fears in the human psyche is the fear of social rejection. Long before modern civilization, isolation meant death. To be cast out from the tribe was to starve, to freeze, or to be hunted by predators. Even though the modern world no longer carries that danger, the fear remains in our unconscious. It is part of what Jung called the shadow, the dark, hidden impulses that shape our behavior without our awareness. So when a man or woman hears a truth that conflicts with the herd, the shadow whispers, "Stay quiet. Do not risk it. Better to be stupid with the group than wise and alone." This is why you can feel your throat tighten in meetings, why your hand trembles before raising it in class, why your lips stay shut even when you know the answer. It is not laziness. It is a survival instinct. Nietzsche, more ruthless than Jung, despised this instinct. He warned that the herd seeks comfort, not truth. The herd prefers illusions that make life easier to swallow rather than truths that make it heavier to bear. He wrote, "Madness is rare in the individual, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages it is the rule." What he meant was that individuals, when forced to think alone, may stumble toward sanity. But when they merge into a collective, reason dissolves, and madness becomes the norm. The herd shields its members from existential anxiety. It gives them certainty, the chants, the slogans, the shared stories. But that certainty is shallow A thin layer of paint over deep cracks of ignorance, and so, wisdom struggles. It calls for solitude, for courage, for the long dark nights of questioning. But solitude is unbearable to most, and thus stupidity, packaged as comfort, prevails. Let us return to the classroom, but this time focus on another student, a young girl in the front row. The professor asks, "Do you agree with the majority opinion that happiness comes from wealth?" The girl knows the truth she has glimpsed in her own life, that wealth often brings emptiness, and meaning is found in love, creativity, and struggle. But she looks around. Every hand has gone up in agreement. Every face is nodding. The silence inside her chest grows heavy. Her heart races. She wants to speak, but the thought of being the only one terrifies her. And so, she raises her hand with the rest, betraying her own wisdom for the safety of the herd. This is how collective stupidity wins, not by persuasion, but by fear. The herd does not need to argue. It only needs to intimidate. Tolstoy once wrote that the strongest of all warriors are these two, time and patience. But solitude, too, is a warrior. Only those who can bear solitude can preserve wisdom against the flood of the herd. Think of Socrates, condemned not because he was wrong, but because he would not join the chorus of ignorance. Think of Galileo, silenced not because he lacked evidence, but because he refused to surrender to the herd's comfort. Their stories remind us that wisdom often walks alone, and that loneliness is the price of truth. But how many are willing to pay this price? Most would rather laugh with the many than weep with the few. Most would rather chant in the stadium than stand silent with integrity. Here lies the paradox. The herd offers safety, but it is a dangerous safety. It protects the individual from loneliness, but also traps them in ignorance. The herd can comfort you as it marches off a cliff. Collective stupidity is not simply ignorance, it is ignorance multiplied, amplified, and weaponized by the instinct to belong. One person may doubt quietly, but in the roar of the crowd that doubt disappears. And when the crowd grows large enough, even the wisest individuals begin to question their own sanity. Nietzsche called for the rise of the Übermensch, the one who dares to create his own values apart from the herd. Jung called for individuation, the process of becoming whole by confronting the shadow within. Both men, in their own way, pointed to the same truth. The greatest battle of wisdom is not against stupidity, but against loneliness. So why does collective stupidity continue to win? Because the herd promises what wisdom cannot: the illusion of safety, the comfort of numbers, the balm against loneliness. Wisdom demands courage, but courage is rare. Each of us faces the same choice daily: to join the chant, or to fall silent and stand apart. To betray ourselves for comfort, or to carry the burden of truth into solitude. The lonely thinker may not always win, but without the lonely thinker, wisdom vanishes altogether. The victory of collective stupidity is built on our fear of solitude. The moment we find the courage to stand alone, even trembling, we begin to weaken the herd's hold. The thinker's loneliness is heavy, but it is the birthplace of wisdom. Why do people cling so desperately to conformity, even when it blinds them? Why do they repeat empty slogans, share false news, and echo the crowd, even when a small voice inside whispers, "This isn't true"? The answer lies not only in fear of exile, but in something deeper, more insidious: addiction. Dr. Gabor Mate, the physician and thinker, often said, "The question is never why the addiction, but why the pain." His work on trauma and dependency reveals that people do not become addicted to substances because of pleasure, but because of suffering. Addiction is an attempt to soothe, to escape, to fill an inner void. Now imagine applying this insight to society as a whole. Could it be that our addiction to conformity, to the herd's agreement, is nothing more than a way of numbing the pain of being alone, uncertain, or rejected? Think of applause. Why does it feel so intoxicating? When you say something that the herd approves of, something that fits the slogans, the chants, the safe boundaries, you are rewarded with smiles, likes, nods, validation. Your brain releases dopamine. Agreement feels like a drug, but like any drug, the high doesn't last. Soon you need more approval, more likes, more followers, more nods of agreement. And just as the addict spirals deeper into dependency, the conformist spirals deeper into stupidity, saying whatever keeps the crowd cheering, no matter how false it is, This is why stupidity spreads faster than wisdom. Stupidity gives quick hits of agreement, while wisdom often earns silence or even hostility. Look at social media. A man posts a thoughtful reflection on the complexity of human freedom. 3 likes, a yawn, maybe a comment asking him to keep it short. Another man posts a ridiculous conspiracy theory with a flashy headline, thousands of shares in an hour. Why? Because the second man gave people the drug they craved. Simple certainty and the comfort of belonging to a group that knows the truth. The first man offered doubt, complexity, and the discomfort of reflection. And discomfort does not go viral. Social media has become the world's largest drug market, where the substance traded is not cocaine or alcohol, but agreement. And the dealers are not men in dark alleys, but algorithms programmed to feed us the next dose. Addiction is always about escape. The alcoholic drinks not for joy, but to numb sorrow. The gambler plays not to win, but to forget his emptiness. Likewise, the conformist conforms not because he truly believes, but because he cannot bear the pain of being excluded. This is why people will passionately defend ideas they secretly doubt. Why do they laugh at jokes they don't find funny? Why do they clap for leaders they don't respect? The pain of exclusion feels unbearable, so they medicate themselves with conformity. Jung would say they are living inauthentically, denying their true self to merge with the collective shadow. Nietzsche would call it decadence, the weakening of the will to power, the surrender of individuality. Gabor Mate would call it trauma, the wound of disconnection driving desperate attempts to belong. Once the addiction takes hold, echo chambers form. People surround themselves only with voices that agree, avoiding anything that might cause discomfort. They live in curated realities where stupidity feels like wisdom because everyone repeats it. This explains why false ideas often spread faster than true ones. The false idea comforts the herd. The true idea unsettles it. Comfort feels like pleasure. Discomfort feels like pain. And like any addict, society chooses the quick fix over the hard cure. Consider a family dinner where one person dares to challenge the unspoken truths of the household. Perhaps he questions a long-held belief, a political loyalty, or a cultural assumption. Immediately the air grows tense. Forks pause, eyes narrow. The challenger is not rejected because he is wrong, but because he has threatened the family's shared drug, agreement. He has risked breaking the illusion that we are all the same. And for most families, most communities, most nations, that illusion is sacred. So what happens? The challenger grows silent. The others return to comfortable chatter. The drug of agreement flows again. The pain of authenticity is avoided. Tolstoy, in a confession, described how he once felt trapped in a life that looked perfect to others but felt meaningless to himself. He wrote that society's pleasures, wealth, reputation, success, were like distractions that dulled the real pain of existence. But the more he indulged, the emptier he became. Conformity works in the same way. It distracts from the pain of loneliness or confusion, but the more we indulge, the emptier we become. The individual self dissolves, leaving only the mask of the herd. If stupidity is a drug, then wisdom is withdrawal. Withdrawal is painful. It shakes the body, unsettles the mind, and makes one question whether sobriety is worth it. Wisdom does the same. It strips away illusions, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, and demands that we live authentically, even if it means losing the applause of the herd. This is why so few people pursue wisdom. It hurts before it heals. Collective stupidity is not just louder than wisdom, it is more addictive. It soothes the pain of loneliness and offers the thrill of agreement. But like any drug, it destroys the very person it comforts. The herd may give you belonging, but it takes your authenticity. It may give you applause, but it robs your voice. It may give you certainty, but it blinds you to truth. Every time you chase agreement over honesty, you take another hit of conformity's drug. It feels good in the moment, but it leaves you emptier in the long run. True wisdom begins when you dare to endure the discomfort of being authentic, even if it means standing alone. What if the real reason wisdom is losing isn't stupidity at all, but our fear of meaning? Leo Tolstoy, one of the greatest writers in history, reached the height of success, wealth, fame, respect, and influence, yet fell into despair so deep he considered ending his life. In a confession, he admitted that the more he achieved, the more meaningless everything became. He wrote, Is there any meaning in my life that will not be destroyed by death? This single question haunted him. It stripped away the illusions of wealth, pleasure, and achievement. It demanded honesty, not comfort. And Tolstoy realized something most of us secretly know but rarely face. Wisdom often hurts before it heals. Why do so many avoid wisdom? Because wisdom forces us to confront responsibility, mortality, and freedom. It asks us to look beyond the games of society, money, status, distraction, and ask, what is the purpose of it all? This question is unbearable for many. It exposes the fragility of our lives. It forces us to admit that much of what we chase is shallow. And so, rather than face the silence of that question, we drown ourselves in noise. Entertainment, work, gossip, possessions, endless scrolling. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But most people never find their why because they never dare to ask. Instead, they inherit second-hand answers from the herd. Success means wealth. Happiness means consumption. Meaning means fitting in. And so, collective stupidity thrives, not because people love stupidity, but because it saves them from the terror of meaning. Think about modern society. The average person works long hours not always out of necessity, but often to stay distracted. Weekends are filled with shopping, parties, or endless entertainment. Nights are swallowed by glowing screens. Busyness has become the modern drug of avoidance. If you are busy, you do not have to sit in silence with your thoughts. You do not have to confront the emptiness that creeps in when everything is quiet. You do not have to ask Tolstoy's question, what is the point of it all? Collective stupidity, then, is not simply ignorance. It is a defense mechanism, a shield against the unbearable weight of meaning. Picture a man who spends his life working in an office. He wakes, commutes, types at a desk, goes home, eats, sleeps, repeats. Occasionally, a quiet thought pierces the routine. Is this all there is? Am I wasting my life? But before the thought can grow, he drowns it with distractions. Television, alcohol, casual chatter. He buries the question beneath busyness. The herd reassures him. This is normal. Everyone lives this way. And so, the man continues, safe in the comfort of stupidity, terrified of the truth wisdom would reveal. Tolstoy faced this same crisis, but he refused to drown it. He allowed the question to burn him. He admitted, my life came to a standstill. I could not breathe, I could not live. But rather than surrender, he turned toward faith, morality, and a search for authentic meaning. He discovered that wisdom is not found in avoiding despair, but in walking through it. Meaning emerges only when you face the emptiness honestly, rather than numbing it with conformity. Most people will never follow Tolstoy's path, because wisdom demands more than intelligence. It demands courage. To live wisely is to accept the burdens of freedom, mortality, and authenticity. It is easier to believe what the herd tells you, that happiness is a bigger paycheck, that purpose is likes and followers, that death is something not to think about. It is easier to chant slogans than to wrestle with questions. It is easier to laugh at wisdom than to live by it. This is why stupidity wins. Not because it is persuasive, but because wisdom is frightening. Psychologists today talk about the poverty mindset, the endless fear of not having enough. But there is another poverty, one deeper and more destructive, the poverty of meaning. When people lack meaning, they fill the void with consumption, conformity, and distraction. They cling to the herd not because it is wise, but because it gives them something to do, something to believe, some illusion of safety. But this poverty of meaning is deadly. It leaves people empty even in wealth, restless even in comfort, anxious even in security. Tolstoy's warning is clear. A life without meaning will collapse, no matter how successful it looks. The herd cannot save you. Collective stupidity cannot protect you. Sooner or later, the silence of truth catches up. The question, then, is not whether stupidity or wisdom wins in society at large. The question is whether you will choose to confront meaning in your own life or continue hiding behind distraction. Wisdom is frightening because it strips away illusions and demands responsibility. But the avoidance of meaning is far more dangerous. If you never face the silence of your own life, you risk living as a shadow, busy, comfortable, but empty. Meaning is not given by the herd. It must be discovered alone. Why do people so often mock or resist wisdom? Why is it easier to celebrate ignorance than to embrace truth? The answer is simple yet disturbing. Wisdom feels like a threat. It does not flatter us. It does not allow us to stay comfortable. It pulls the mask from our faces and forces us to see reality. The French philosopher Michel de Montaigne once admitted, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." Yet, belonging to oneself requires breaking away from the herd. And the herd does not forgive those who walk away. Think about the last time someone spoke an uncomfortable truth in a group. Silence followed. Perhaps nervous laughter. Maybe even anger. Why? Because truth unsettles. It demands change. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic, wrote in his Meditations, "If someone can prove me wrong, I will gladly change. For it is the truth I seek, not the victory of my own opinion." But imagine saying this in today's world. Most people are not seeking truth. They are seeking validation. They want their feelings confirmed, not challenged. They want to believe they are right, even if they are lost. And so when wisdom appears, it feels like an attack. Collective stupidity offers protection. It keeps people hidden in the crowd. But wisdom exposes the individual. It whispers, "You are responsible. You must think for yourself. You must change." This is terrifying. It's easier to say, "Everyone else is doing it, so it must be fine." History is full of examples. Socrates was executed for corrupting the youth by teaching them to think. Jesus was crucified for challenging empty traditions. Even Galileo was silenced for pointing out that the earth was not the center of the universe. What was their real crime? They made people uncomfortable. Picture a small village where everyone believes the sun rises because the rooster crows. One day a curious boy says, "No, the rooster just makes noise." The sun would rise anyway. The villagers do not thank him for his wisdom. They laugh, call him foolish, and maybe even punish him. Why? Because his truth undermines their comfort, their traditions, their unity. And so, stupidity wins. Not because it is persuasive, but because it is safer to believe together than to think alone. Wisdom is also threatening because it challenges power. Leaders, whether in politics, religion, or business, often prefer a compliant herd to independent thinkers. A population that questions is dangerous. A population that obeys is useful. This is why propaganda thrives. This is why shallow slogans replace deep reflection. This is why people who question too much are often labeled rebels, troublemakers, or outcasts. Schopenhauer once said, "The majority of men are not capable of thinking, but only of believing. Belief is convenient for the powerful. Thinking is dangerous, but the threat of wisdom is not only external, it is also internal." Wisdom challenges the lies we tell ourselves. It reveals our hypocrisy, our addictions, our cowardice. For example, wisdom tells us to live in the present, yet we cling to regrets of the past and fears of the future. Wisdom tells us that anger only harms ourselves, yet we hold on to grudges. Wisdom tells us that wealth does not guarantee happiness, yet we keep chasing more. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You could leave life right now." Let that determine what you do and say and think. This thought is liberating, but also terrifying. It means excuses vanish. It means time is short. It means we can no longer delay living authentically, and so people resist. Collective stupidity wins because it asks nothing of us. It allows us to remain children, to avoid responsibility, to keep our illusions. Wisdom, on the other hand, asks for courage. It asks for sacrifice. It asks for the humility to admit we were wrong. And few are willing to pay that price. Montaigne once laughed at human arrogance, writing, "We are, I know not how, double in ourselves, so that what we believe we disbelieve, and cannot rid ourselves of what we condemn." He saw the contradiction. Humans admire wisdom, yet avoid living by it. Perhaps this is why wisdom often survives in books, but not in practice. We quote Marcus Aurelius on social media, yet live as if we never read him. We admire Tolstoy's courage, yet avoid asking his questions. We nod at Jung's insights, yet hide from our own shadows. We like wisdom as decoration, but not as a demand. This is why collective stupidity wins. It feels safe. Wisdom feels dangerous. If wisdom feels like a threat, it is because it touches the places we most need to change. The discomfort is not a sign to reject it. It is a sign to listen more deeply. Stupidity comforts, but wisdom transforms. And transformation always begins in discomfort. The question is no longer about society, it is about you. Because in truth, the war between wisdom and stupidity is not fought in parliaments, classrooms, or social media feeds. It is fought inside each of us every day, in every choice, in every thought we allow or reject. The herd will always be there, loud and persuasive, offering comfort and belonging. But wisdom will always whisper too, quiet yet persistent, offering freedom and truth. The only question is, which voice will you follow? Imagine standing before a mirror. One reflection shows you in the herd, safe, accepted, never questioned. You smile because you belong, but inside you feel the quiet emptiness of someone who never lived authentically. The other reflection shows you alone, misunderstood, maybe even mocked. You carry the weight of thinking for yourself. But in your eyes there is clarity, a light that cannot be faked, the dignity of truth. Which reflection would you choose? Throughout history, the wisest minds faced the same choice. Socrates chose truth over comfort and drank the hemlock. Marcus Aurelius ruled the world, yet reminded himself daily to live humbly, aware of death. Nietzsche warned that the herd would always crush the higher individual, yet insisted that one must still strive to live beyond it. Tolstoy walked through despair and found meaning by confronting it rather than avoiding it. Jung urged us to face our shadows, knowing that wholeness lies on the other side of discomfort. Each of them paid a price. But they lived, not as echoes of others, but as authentic voices of their own. Stupidity, however, is seductive. It promises ease. It gives you a ready-made script. Work, consume, distract yourself, die quietly. It tells you not to question, not to stand out, not to feel too deeply. And it feels safe, until one day it doesn't. One day you wake up and the years are gone. You realize you lived for others' approval, not for your own soul. You realize that comfort kept you from growing. You realize that by avoiding wisdom, you also avoid yourself. This is the tragedy Tolstoy feared, to live long but never truly live. There is a story of two men on their deathbeds. The first man lived wisely, though not perfectly. He questioned, he searched, he loved, he suffered, he grew. He dies with tears in his eyes, but they are tears of gratitude. He whispers, "I lived." The second man lived foolishly, though comfortably. He avoided hard questions, chased pleasures, and followed the herd. He dies with fear in his eyes, whispering, "I wasted it." Which man do you want to be? Philosophy does not give easy answers. It does not hand you a ready-made meaning. What it does give is freedom, the terrifying, beautiful freedom to create your own life consciously. But freedom is heavy. It demands responsibility. It demands honesty. It demands that you stop blaming the herd and begin shaping yourself. Marcus Aurelius put it simply. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. We live in a time of unprecedented distraction. Never before has stupidity been so amplified by technology, so packaged and sold as entertainment. The herd is louder than ever, but precisely because of this, wisdom matters more than ever. Your refusal to think blindly is not just for you. It becomes a light for others lost in the noise. Every act of authentic living is an act of quiet rebellion. Choosing wisdom is not just personal. It is a contribution to humanity. The battle between stupidity and wisdom will never end. The herd will always be bigger, louder, more seductive. But history shows us this truth. It only takes one honest voice to change the course of generations. So the real question is not, why is collective stupidity winning? The real question is, will you let it win? At every moment, you stand at a crossroads between comfort and truth, illusion and reality, herd and self. Collective stupidity wins only if you surrender your freedom. But if you choose wisdom, even quietly, even imperfectly, you reclaim your life. Wisdom may not make you popular. It may not make you rich, but it will make you real. And in the end, to live real is the only victory that matters. The end.